Hello everybody, so this is just a really quick follow-up to the last video that I did regarding whether or not Adam was with Eve in the garden when she was talking to Satan and when she ate the fruit. And I was actually hoping that this would be brought up in conversation because it was something that I totally did not even think about going through when I was doing that video, and I thought about after the fact. I always think about things after the fact and wish that I had said them. But Ichimens, thank you very much for asking this question or for making this statement, for bringing this up. I very, very much appreciate it because it is an important point to understand in the whole context of the two. And if you guys didn't watch the video that I did, I read from my book, significant portions from my book, regarding Genesis 1 through 3, my book called In the Beginning, in the Spotlight Volume 3, In the Beginning, talking about Genesis 3 and the setup to who the serpent was, and then the very end of it, I end that book talking about the two marriage covenants that existed. There are probably a fair amount of people who are familiar with the concept of the ancient Jewish wedding ceremony as it relates to Jesus and the rapture of the church. And what that represents is a restoration of the fallen relationship from fall to perfection. Now, the opposite of that is true back in the garden, and that is the covenant between God and Adam. 1 Corinthians 15 sets this up for us, talking about the first man, Adam, and the second man, which is the Lord from heaven, the first Adam and the second Adam. Essentially, what you have in the garden is a reverse of what Jesus came to do. Jesus came to fix, to repair the broken relationship between man and God and bridge the gap to provide a way back to God for man. In the garden, you have the reverse of that. You have from perfection to the fall. And there is and was a marriage covenant in place between God and Adam. What you find in the steps of the ancient Jewish wedding ceremony between Christ and the church is that they're the exact opposite of what they were in the garden between God and Adam. And so I actually wrote in detail about that in the book, because the entire premise about what you read about the fall of man in Genesis 3 is predicated upon these marriage covenants. And Ephesians 5, the duty from husband to wife and from wife to husband, which is the husband is supposed to love his wife. So God's role in his marriage covenant with Adam was to love Adam perfectly. And Adam's role in the marriage covenant with God was to submit perfectly to God. Conversely, or I guess additionally to that, there was, when Eve was created and given to Adam, there became a second marriage covenant that Adam was a part of. He was the husband in that relationship, specifically given the duty to love Eve perfectly. And her duty in her marriage covenant to her husband was to perfectly submit to him. And it is the aspects of submission that we find failures. Eve did not submit to the command that her husband gave her to not eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. His command to her was actually different from that of God's to him. Because in Genesis 2, the command given by God to Adam before Eve was even created was to not eat of the fruit of the tree of good and evil, lest you die. Now Adam presumably gave the command to his wife to not eat of it, but not to even touch it. She failed in her submission to her husband. He loved her perfectly and sacrificially gave himself up for her. We learn in 1 Timothy 2 that Adam was not deceived. He knew exactly what he was doing when he ate the fruit. So it was Eve did not submit to her husband's command. Adam loved her perfectly in a sacrificial way and gave himself up for her so that he could remain one flesh with the woman that God had given him. His first duty became to her to love. However, in loving her perfectly, he failed in his submission to God and broke God's command to not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. However, God loved him perfectly and sacrificed the lamb to clothe them both, which is synonymous with covering sin. 1 Peter 4:8 tells us that charity or love covereth a multitude of sins. That is the reference to the lamb slain from the foundation of the world that we learn about in Revelation 13. And obviously it was the first Passover, the Passover leading to obviously our Passover 4,000 years later, who is Christ. So all the way back in the garden, you have the foreshadowing of the reconciliation that God would create through Jesus to bridge the gap that the first man's sin created. But the marriage covenant exists in the garden regardless between God and Adam. And then obviously when Eve was created, there was one between Adam and Eve. So Adam was actually part of two marriage covenants. In the one to God, his duty was to submit. In the one to Eve, his duty was to love. So the comment was good talk, things I never really thought about. I don't understand still that if he was with her during that exchange with Satan, why did he let her eat it? If he knew it was wrong and wasn't deceived by the lie. And so my comment to that was, and I will expand upon this in just a second, but I will read my my response back. Said he had already told her not to do it. That's where free will comes in. It was still her choice to do what her husband told her not to. And we don't know how quickly everything happened. I mean, it's not like he was going to physically tackle her and restrain her. But this is exactly why in the resurrection we shall neither be married nor given in marriage. Loyalties can never be split again. We will only ever be loyal to Jesus in the obedience capacity after this. And this goes to the marriage covenant that exists between Jesus and the church. Jesus as the husband who has the duty to perfectly love the wife. The wife has the duty to perfectly submit to the husband. This is exactly why in Matthew 22, Jesus says the following. In verse 23, the same day came to him the Sadducees, which say there is no resurrection, and asked him, saying, Master, Moses, if a man die having no children, his brother shall marry his wife, and raise up seed unto his brother. Now there were with us 7 brethren. And the first, when he had married a wife deceased, and having no issue, left his wife unto his brother. Likewise the second also, and the third unto the 7th. And last of all the woman died also. So basically what they were trying to do was tempt Jesus and get him to stumble and maybe something he hadn't considered, like who's going to get this woman in the resurrection? Who's going to be your husband if she had 7 of them on earth? Jesus' response. Jesus answered and said unto them, Ye do err, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. This is specifically the reason why after we are glorified, we will not be married or given in marriage ever again at all. Because our loyalties will never, ever again be split like they were in the garden, Adam being the perfect example of that, where he was in one marriage covenant, the wife who had the duty to submit, and in the other, the husband who had the duty to love. His loyalties, he had to make a decision. Remain loving toward Eve and retain the one flesh and give himself up in the sacrificial capacity for her when she erred, or continue in his submission to God, which would destroy the concept of one flesh, would separate the two of them forever, and would have destroyed everything after that. So which way did he go? The woman that God gave to be with him, his helpmate, his one flesh, or fail in his submission to God? He failed in his submission to God, and God created a way through love. But in the resurrection, that will never be able to happen again. Loyalties will never be split. We will be loyal to Jesus and to him only. And it is for that reason, in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. So that what happened in the garden can never happen again. That's also why in the 1,000-year millennial reign on earth, you see Satan bound. There will be no deception of any sort during that entire 1,000-year period, so that what occurred in the garden among perfect beings will not be allowed to happen again on earth among glorified beings during Jesus' millennial reign on earth. These things are specifically designed to not be allowed again. So you have in the resurrection, no split loyalties, because our loyalty will reside to our husband, who is Jesus, and him alone. And you have the deceiver bound for the 1,000 years, so there is no deception. So what happened to Eve cannot happen again to us at all, ever. These are the protections in place to ensure that what occurred in the garden that precipitated the fall of man cannot recur. So I appreciate this comment. I very much appreciate that. And this is why we see these other passages of Scripture explaining how Jesus has put in place preventative measures to ensure no more fall of mankind. If you guys have questions, comments, or feedback, let me know. But I sincerely appreciate this comment and giving me the opportunity to expand upon this, which is something I wanted to do, and I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to, so I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys later.